Chuck, you can share a little bit about our tunnel, why we have it, where it came from.
This is called a high tunnel, and the reason it's a tunnel versus a greenhouse is because it has no supplemental heat. It relies strictly on solar radiation and ventilation to help regulate temperatures. Whereas a greenhouse will have sometimes a double skin. It has air blown in between the skins, supplemental heat, and sometimes fans that are used at the ends to help ventilate. With this one, on a day like today, the house would be closed. See how much warmer it was when you walked in here. We had maybe 5, 6, 7 degrees. And then when it gets hot and you want to vent it, open to both end doors, and the curtains on the side. On this particular house, go down. I've had them before where they crank up, but if you have crops that are growing close to the ground, it's more advantageous to have them open from the top, because you can get ventilation in the tunnel without having a lot of air directly on the crop. So this was part of a cooperative effort with Virginia State University, which is in Petersburg, and we are going to grow red raspberries in here. It is one of the crops that is super sensitive to high humidity and rain. It gets mold very quickly. If any of you are past CSA members, you know that when you get raspberries in your share, you eat the raspberries first. And part of it is because of the conditions that we're growing them here in the East. If they're grown in more favorable conditions, they have a much longer shelf life and don't get as much botrytis. So what we're planning on doing in here is we've got 3 beds that were made up, and we're going to use a landscape fabric to cover the ground we're walking on to stop any weeds from coming up, and it will overlap the top of the bed with 2 pieces, and then they'll be folded back, an irrigation line put down the middle, and plants set every 18 inches down the row. And since this is, relatively small, we're going to put in a variety trial that will have varieties we're putting in are Himbo Top, Joan J, a numbered selection called BP1, and Josephine. So we're putting 4 varieties in here, which we all have out growing in the field now, but we want to see how they're going to act in here. Part of the benefits of being in plastic or under this type of plastic is that it helps diffuse light as well, so you don't get the shadows that you get when you're in the open field, because once the light comes through the plastic, it's diffused in many directions, and the plants are actually better able to utilize that in this condition than they are outside. So you'll get plants, the same variety in here will be 30 to 40% taller, more vigorous than what it is being grown outside. Some of the things you have to be aware of once you start growing in enclosed structures is you are supplying all of the food, you're supplying all of the moisture. This ground right now is bone dry because all the water is getting shed off on both sides. So we'll put an autumn. Actually, to till this ground up, I had to put irrigation in here to get the ground moist enough to be able to work it. And what we'll do now is I'll put those. It's a wobbler. It's like a small micro sprinkler. We'll put those in again and moisten the beds down before we plant. But also, by not having moisture in the area where we're standing, there'll be very little weed growth as well. So.
And our hope is that we'll get season extension in here so that we won't have that first frost in the fall, which sometimes can catch us a little early, late October, early November, and therefore we'll have fruit into Thanksgiving time. which is when we still have several farmers markets and there's demand for it. And the other part will be that hopefully a year from now we would be seeing a good bit of bloom actually in here because it would be a little bit earlier. So again, if you have something a little earlier, a little bit later, that's great. And so that's the other reason we're hoping to. And Virginia State University was able to get a grant and have several of these around the state, and they were supplying to a lot of the beginner growers, and then they were able to get funding to have experienced grower like us put it in to see how it does relative to our field grown material.
Are they going to plant the same type of plants at the various locations so they can do a comparative analysis?
They are very similar. It's variable as to what the quantities are of those varieties, but I believe almost all the same varieties are at all locations.
Right, and it's only red raspberry.
Right.
Because we wanted to plant some blackberries in here, and it's not until we've completed our obligations with them, which is 3 years, and then
yours to do with it if you wish.
yes.
Do you know what they're going to do with the results once they complete their analysis? Any idea?
The person behind this is Razi Rafi, and he is really trying to promote Virginia as an area that can be a raspberry, blackberry growing region. And I think what he's realizing is that in order to be able to compete nationally in that business, you've got to be in covered structures. And so what he's trying to do is to get enough of these out in the state, find out where it's going to work the best, and then continue to promote it afterwards. Yeah.
Interesting.
How hands-on are they?
We go to his place to see what to do. They haven't been here.
Just because that's another variable.
Yes.
Who's growing?
Well, in the beginning, their grant they had for it was over 4 different years. The first year they had them available. We didn't qualify because we were an experienced grower. They wanted them to go to new growers. Then the second round of them that came out were only for organic growers. And I didn't want to qualify for that because I want to have more tools to use. And then the third year, after having a conversation with Razi, I was like, if you want this to be successful, you need experienced growers to be the ones that are giving you your research data so that you can show that this will work instead of having someone who's new at it. So, and that's where this one came in. It was supposed to have been put up last year in April, and we had a planting that we had already established with this row spacing, and they were going to put the tunnel over top of it. This wasn't put up until August, and that's why there's nothing in here now.
And the other site's on rented land, so we thought, well, probably we'll keep an eye on things better. Like, when it has to be lifted up for ventilation, we're going to be living here. It'll be easier to keep an eye on it. So again, minimizing any of our challenges. That part of it
If the sun were to come out right now, the temperature in here could go from, what is it?
48?
Is this 60 now?
Yeah.
It could go to 90 in half an hour? Really quickly. So if you have sensitive crops in here, you need to be able to get the sides up and ventilated. You also need to be handy when there's storms, because the best way to keep this intact is to button it up. If you let air in, it inevitably cannot get out as fast as it's coming in.
So we'll keep reporting on the tunnel for you.
Yeah, that would be good.
I just think we just need to prove that this will work for us by having early fruit and later fruit, and then
like about $1,500 you can buy things that are raised lower the doors and windows and they'll lay the whole thing for you.
okay, so that it's
It'd be like a greenhouse operation.
okay.
so you don't have to run out here and say, oh crap, it's on a storm, I better go shut things down.
Right, if you're not around, yeah.
Right. So you're married to this.
34 years later. Well, the other opportunity we have while we're right here is that Chuck could share with you how he feeds the plants. Remember I mentioned that we have irrigation under that. It's also how we supply its food source. And the interesting, challenging thing with raspberries and blackberries is at this point they know that there's particular micronutrients that they need that may not be natural in the soil, but we're able to put in with its food. So Chuck's going to tell you about our water and maybe show us how he did it.
Part of having the plastic, it limits you to how you feed the plants, because any soil applied fertilizers can't get to where the majority of the roots are. The majority of the roots are under the plastic. Now there are some that have ventured out from there, but the majority of the plant roots are underneath the plastic. There's a trickle line that's under the plastic that has an emitter in it every 24 inches that will seep water out, and we have a timer that will let it run for a prescribed amount of time. And whether you want it to run every day for 2 hours, which is what we do in the summer when they're fruiting, and in conditions like we're having now, you monitor it, and we've run irrigation when we want to fertilize. So we're able to put the nutrients that the plants require when they require them through the trickle irrigation system. Yep. There's another one 2 feet away. Here and here. So it's sort of like 20 years ago when you grew everything on the open, you would fertilize once in the spring, once in the beginning of the summer, and that would be all you would do. So it would be like going to an all-you-could-eat buffet and eating twice a year. Versus what we do with them is we're spoon-feeding them and giving them a little bit of food once a week. There's certain times of the year that micronutrients are more in demand than others. Like when they're flowering, boron is one of the elements that the flowers need. It helps with the pollen tubes to grow quicker, and you get a better fruit set. So instead of having a berry that's sort of lopsided, it gives you that very heart-shaped, uniform looking fruit. So we'll run boron through the trickle irrigation system, and it's a very low concentration because boron comes as a 21% solution, and a pound per acre is all you need of boron. So whereas another nutrient that they use a lot of, like nitrogen, we give them in the spring about 10 pounds a week. And they got their fertilizer last week, and this week they have not gotten any. And it's all staged right here, ready to go. So.